What's up, everyone? Welcome to Level 7. It is time for another episode of the Agents of Fandom podcast. I'm your host, TJ Zwarich. We got a big day today. We are talking, of course, the Bad Batch episode 6 and 7, a dual release. But first up, we will be talking about the return of Invincible on Prime Video. Season 2, Part 2 is here. Episode 5 is here. We got 4 episodes to break down over the course of the next few weeks with Invincible. Joined as always by my co-host and good buddy Adam Blevins. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. I almost can't believe what's happening right now. We're in this age of TV. You know, everybody was talking about going into this year. 2024 is going to be so slack for projects and all these things. And we're in March, and obviously we just got Dune. We talked about that, but then on the TV side of things, Invincible is just starting. We're in the middle of Shogun. And then we're in the middle of the Bad Batch, which to me are 3 very unique, very different shows, but also 3 shows that are like as close to 10 out of 10 as you can get. So I'm excited we get to talk about 2 of them. I hate that Shogun got cut off the agenda today, understandably so. There's not an infinite amount of time to talk about this stuff, but yeah, I'm still super excited to talk about Invincible and the Bad Batch as well.
And this will also be the last week where we are not breaking down X-Men 97 coming to Disney Plus on March 20th. And I will have my first interview for that one coming. I'll be doing the interview later today since this drops on a Friday, and we'll hopefully get that out by Monday at the latest on the podcast feed as well. But I will be talking to the head of television and animation and streaming at Marvel Studios, Brad Winderbaum. We'll talk a little X-Men 97, see if I can get a little more out of him as well. We'll try and get some information there, but that's going to be really enjoyable. And then, of course, next week we will be breaking down X-Men 97. I've seen the first 3 episodes, and it is fantastic. The animation is really, really great. It kind of looks like they took just a few like tidbits of how they do things with Invincible in terms of how the animation looks in X-Men 97, and it looks great. The stories are fantastic. I'm watching this, and one of the first things I said to Ava is, I went, wow, they're really not writing Cyclops like a bitch ass. And I think that was one of those things with how popular the character of Wolverine was over the 90s and the 2000s, that they just sort of wrote Cyclops to suck in most forms of X-Men media because Wolverine was so popular, and there's obviously the Wolverine and Jean storyline. You want to be able to cheer for Wolverine, and so Cyclops kind of sucked in X-Men the movies and even X-Men the animated series, but not in this case. They make him look pretty great. Storm has some really awesome moments, and the storyline is fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to breaking down that show. But for today, the first thing we're going to break down is Invincible. So if you're watching us on YouTube, smash that like button, hit the notification bell, and make sure you are subscribed to the Agents of Fandom, not only on YouTube, but wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure you're following the Agents of Fandom on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all the socials. It's at Agents Fandom on TikTok and Twitter, Agents of Fandom everywhere else. What did you think about the first episode back from our little break on Invincible? Because while the episode was great, first thing I that clued in here is like, oh yeah, Invincible. That's going, like, these breaks are definitely taking their toll.
Yeah, well, I feel exactly the same about that, because it was almost kind of a shock. I remember when we got it, it was like, oh wow, we still have to finish the second. We pretty much just dropped off in the middle of a season. We still have to finish the second season, and I'm personally not a fan of these mid-season breaks like that for that very reason. I feel like it almost takes you out of it a little bit. Now, that's not a criticism of the episode or even the season in general. It's more just a criticism of the release method, But overall, the first episode is great. But it was just kind of like, we're back into it now, and we are just like foot on the pedal down to the floor, to the all the way to the end, and like really from the start of this episode to the end. It's not like episode 1 and 2. In part 1 were very, they were still great. I think so far the whole season's been great, but they were still very slow paced, just like in general, like most first episodes of a season are. But this doesn't feel like, like this is the first part in a new, or like the first episode in a new part. It's just like, no, this is like one of the episodes near the end of a season that's like crazy, and they really just crank everything up to 10. But overall, it's a great episode. I mean, what else do we expect from them? Because so far, to this point, through 15 or 13 episodes, they've pretty much all been spectacular. So I'm excited to get into the specifics though, because there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens.
This whole second half of season 2 really just says kind of, hey, we put the groundwork, the pieces together, the groundwork has been set in the first half of the season, and now it's just go, 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 go. The entirety of these last 4 episodes, starting with the first one. And obviously there's things like the strike and stuff like that that played into it, and they've said now, like, we hear you. We know you guys didn't like the break. We're already working on season 3. We're going to try and pump it out quicker. So that's great. That's something that they hopefully learn from the mistakes and keep it going. But let's dive into episode 1 specifically. There's like a little bit of calm and just picking up the pieces for the first bit, like dealing with the aftermath of the Viltrumites coming to Thraxis, wiping everything out, and just putting the pieces back together. We find out that the baby still alive and the queen still alive. And we get this period of time where Mark's just chilling on the planet, kind of putting back the pieces together after the Viltrums just completely slaughtered the place.
Yeah, well, I think the most interesting part about this to me was that, it's very much like Mark to help rebuild this planet. He's not just going to run, but even after he helps, they're like, hey, okay, thanks for helping us. We'll send you a ship to go back home. He's like, it's okay. No, it's fine. I'll stay and hang out a little bit longer. When it's like unlike Mark in the sense that we know that he would, like, in his mind, he really wants to go back and check on his family. He's worried about his mom and everything else, and Eve and Amber and and William, everything that's going on back home. We know that he wants to go and check on them, but like so many of us at one point or another, he's like afraid of what he might find. So he's kind of shirking that responsibility and just being like, I know I got stuff to do at home, so I'll just hang out here for another little while longer. Don't worry about it. But I don't know, that part was really interesting to me, just because it kind of contrasts both parts of who Mark is. But it was good to see also just the aftermath of what it looks like a Viltrum on Viltrum battle, because it feels like it's kind of foreshadowing what we could see either in the end of this season or next season. And all this kind of stuff, because this was just like 2-on-3 in terms of Viltrumites. Like there's like only 4 or 5 of them, and it left. I mean, they almost destroyed the entire planet, or like half of it in multiple cities. So it's like when they bring their whole army or whatever to reclaim this planet, like what's that going to look like? Because given what we see here, it feels like it's going to be pretty terrifying.
Pretty terrifying. And I think like what you brought up with Mark makes so much sense. Is you date it back to high school, and it's like, oh, I got this homework assignment done, I'm just gonna do all these other things in the meantime. You look at it now and it's like, I got some writer's block, I don't want to write this article. Why don't I clean my entire house? I'll clean my entire house today. That's what I'll do. And that's kind of where Mark is at. And on Thraxis, he has this clear, this is the goal. This is my purpose. This is what I'm here for. It's not an easy situation. It's obviously a terrible situation, but it's an easy decision-making process of this is what I have to do. Will make things better if I put stuff together here. Whereas at home, is it which one of these people should I be spending more time with? What do I do with my mom? She's going through such a tough time. I want to be in college, but I want to be a superhero. The decisions are a lot more difficult. The path is a lot more difficult because you don't know where he's going to go. But eventually he returns home with the baby. And that's the situation I found very interesting, because obviously with everything we know, everything Mark knows, everything Debbie knows, they don't want to give the baby to Cecil, because like, who wants to trust Cecil and that whole company with the baby? Like they do some shady shit over there. But at the same time, it's like, you look at this from an objective perspective. Well, who really would be more qualified to deal with a super baby on a planet they know nothing about than these people? And we could just go on with our lives. It's a tough situation. You come home with a half brother, and it's like, yeah, I obviously would like to deal with this, but I'm not ready to be a parent. I can't ask my mom to be doing this. And they are the people who would be most qualified to handle this situation.
Well, the funny thing is that in the beginning of this, or when Mark first gets home, comes home, Debbie does want. She's like, she's so rightfully upset when she learns that Nolan went right off and he fathered another kid. He got married and did all this again, because then the last however many years of her life, 20 plus years of her life, just almost kind of immediately got invalidated just by that, like learning that one thing, because it is like, it goes back to what he called her, at the end of season 1, like, you're just a pet. Like, you're more a pet to me because I could go off and live 100 lifetimes and get married to 100 people and have 100 kids. And like, you'll, in the time that you will like be gone. So, but the difference between him, like, cause you're right. Cecil and them, they may be more like, they're more qualified to deal with what things that would go along with raising a super baby, especially an alien super baby from a different planet. But then you think about, if this baby grows up with them, like, what the humanity aspect of him, like, what's he going to learn compared to growing up with like a mom and a brother, as opposed to growing up in a defense agency dorm room, being like training from the time he's young. There's actually 2 very different versions of Oliver. And I think that Mark and Debbie both know that, like, yeah, like Cecil would be equipped to take care of him, like physically, like obviously they'd be able to feed him because they've got, resources from all around the universe. So they'd be able to take care of him physically, but it's like, how would he like grow up to be a person? And they've seen firsthand what can go wrong when super people don't really have the best morals. So for them, I think there's a lot of, like, maybe he could take care of him, but I feel like we should probably just do this ourselves, because we know we can at least do our best and do our part to make him a good person.
And the alternate possibilities have kind of already been teased to us with just how season 2 began, with seeing an alternate universe's Mark and him just absolutely terrorizing planet Earth. And that's a theme throughout the rest of these episodes. And you kind of see as an audience, well, like, ooh, if things don't go great, this could maybe not turn out very good. And that we've been pumping out Invincible coverage on agentsfandom.com. I wrote a spoiler-free review. You've been crushing out the recaps. One of our new writers, TJ Pastilli, Fat Thor on socials, he wrote a great Easter egg comic book breakdown. And one of the nuggets he had in there is how the relationship between Debbie and Mark in animation is really different than in comics. Like, they're much closer. They have a much tighter knit relationship in the animated show than they do in comics. And we see Debbie's superpowers every single episode, with how she treats other people, how she handles different situations. And it could be going forward a very crucial component of this kid's life to have Debbie in his life and to have Debbie playing a role. And there's like, it's wild how much they can plug into a single episode of Invincible. Like with this, we get Adam Eve, struggling. Do I want to be a superhero? Look at all these people that got hurt the last time I tried to help. Her grappling with like the kind of Spider-Man-esque, there's people always getting hurt no matter how much I do. Yeah, bro, you live in New York. There's 10 million people there. You're not going to be able to help everybody all the time. You got Shapesmith being a Martian. He's essentially Martian Manhunter, but voiced by Sonic the Hedgehog. I love it. And he's you find out he's a Martian. You find out his backstory with all the little Starro things from Suicide Squad in the DC universe that I don't really remember their names off the top of my head right now. Sequids, thank you. With the Sequids, they pull in Invincible different things from these different comic companies and they make them their own and they utilize the stories differently. It's so incredible. You get Donald. We're finding out that he's a friggin' cyborg. He died and they just popped his brain back in a mechanical body. So he's going to be having his own little quest going forward that we won't touch on because we've already seen it. But he's got his own little quest going forward. All leading up to Shapesmith, Adam Eve, Invincible. Their stories are colliding because the Sequids are coming to Earth and they're going to fuck shit up. And if they don't handle it on this Martian cruiser, we are going to get our Invincible style Suicide Squad movie happening in real time on planet Earth. What did you think of their ability to balance all of these different things, throw it all into one episode? Because to me, it feels like it was 3 episodes, but it was handled perfectly.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I know you said, and we don't need to touch on, where Donald's going because, full transparency, like you said, we have seen all the episodes, so we know exactly what's coming. So we're not going to, you guys won't hear us speculate on, well, what's coming next. But I'll say I do want to just touch on Donald briefly in that it was really, really sad with him, right? Because they kind of tease a lot throughout the first half of the season in part one, like what's going on with him when as soon as he like wakes up and he sees that footage of him getting killed by Omni-Man. And then you're like, okay, well now I want to know because Donald's he's a good guy. He's not really like moving one way or the other really hard, but he's a good guy. Like the people are rooting for Donald, so we're like, okay, I want him to learn the truth about what happened. And then in this episode, he learns the truth, and you're kind of like, damn, I almost wish you wouldn't have even gone looking for this because now it's really sad, right? To think about all these times that he's died and done these things, and they keep putting him back together and doing all that. It reminds me so much of and I know you asked me a completely different question, and I like rewound and I'm talking about something else, but so unlike me, right? But it reminds me of, I don't remember who said it about Darth Vader, but they're talking about it and they're like, he's more man. I think it actually may have been in Fallen Order, one where they're like, he's more man or more machine than man now. And I was like, to think about every time he's died, there's less of him to put back together. And that he's just slow. Like now he really is just not even like he's not even the same person anymore. Those memories are fabricated. That's all fabric. That's like so poignant.
Ship of Theseus.
That's a great comparison. And poignant was the wrong word to use there. It's just straight sad. It's really just sad because and he feels that too. As soon as he learns, he almost feels the same way, right? Because he's like, damn, like I've been chasing the truth, thinking that it was going to be something that would kind of set me free. And now I feel even worse than I did before. And I was like, now I feel worse too. But I wanted to touch on that a little bit because, like you said, we're not going to speculate on or fake speculate on what's coming. But that was just within this episode, something that I thought was really interesting. But yeah, their ability to balance all this stuff. It's funny when you sent me the rundown and I was rereading back through the recap to kind of prep for this because, like I said, I didn't have time to rewatch it. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, holy cow, I remember all this stuff happening, but I thought it happened like over the course of the 4 episodes in different spots. I was like, I forgot this was all in in episode 5, in the first episode back, because it really is. They're touching on like 4 to 5 different stories at one time, and even kind of taking the same character. Like you've got Mark with like the Guardians, and then you've also got Mark with Debbie and with Nolan's son and all this kind of stuff. So it's like they're even taking different characters and kind of picking them and dropping them down in these different places and using them to advance the story. That's like, it's almost like they're playing 4D chess with how well they're able to tell this story by picking and choosing what they want to move forward. Like there's no wasted space because these episodes are like 45 minutes, between 45 and an hour. They're usually not right at an hour or over, but they're not like the 30 to 40 minutes like we see in a lot of other places. So if I remember correctly, they're all right around 45. But to be able to tell this much of this many different stories and do it really well, there's not a single one where one of the worst marks of a bad story, especially when they're trying to tell multiple like plots like this, is when you get to one and you're like, oh, I just want to go back to what we were watching before because this is so much less interesting. But in this, it's like they don't have like an A plot, a B plot, a C plot. And they just have like 1A, 1AA, 1AAA. And like they're all equally great and equally interesting. And that I miss being with the characters anytime we go away from them, but not because what we're getting is less interesting. So like I said, it really is like I just imagine them when they're putting this together in post and editing, just playing 4D chess, watching it, because the way they're able to put all this together is brilliant. It's brilliant.
It's so special, and it's a very different situation, but how they amalgamate it all together reminds me a lot of Avengers Infinity War, because there are very few movies that do that exact thing as good as Avengers Infinity War, where the second you start feeling the slightest bit bored with one of the stories, it catapults you into an entirely different group of characters you forgot that you were going to be getting, but the way they, with the score and the way they introduce them, it's so incredibly exciting. Damn, I want to watch Infinity War again right now.
Same.
But it ties it so together so well. The big fight scene at the end it's so nerve-wracking because with Invincible especially, another reason Infinity War is so great is the stakes. They lose, and you're like, what the fuck? Well, that happens all the time in Invincible. And so you truly never know when they're going to win, when they're going to lose. We lose Duplicate. Duplicate gets ripped to shreds. Rex is losing all kinds of body parts and getting torn around, and it's a great season arc for Rex. You know, Rex keeps stepping up, and he keeps getting punched right in the fucking face every time he steps up, but he keeps getting right back up there. So it's a good story for him. But I think kind of what all of this shown, everything leading up to this fight, it's what Mark was avoiding by staying on Thraxis. It's why he wanted to stay there, so he didn't have to worry about all of these different things. And the second he's home, he's stopping an alien invasion. He's trying to rekindle things with his girlfriend. He's trying to find out how much he missed at college. He's bringing a baby home to his mom that belonged to her ex-husband. Just so many different things to deal with. And then you throw into that the death of Duplicate. Sorry. And it's just like, it's so much going on all at once. And the end of this episode is essentially just, we see at the beginning, Mark is shirking responsibilities. He's trying to stay there. It's easier. At home, he knows there's lots of problems to deal with. The second he gets home, all of these problems are at the forefront, and none of them are going all that well.
Yeah, well, you know, the biggest thing too is that he's so, how he handles everything is very different, right? Because like Cecil's always on his ass because Cecil needs heroes, but I mean, like, and nobody else, like Amber just wants to spend time with him. Debbie just wants to spend time with him. And he's like trying his best to be really present with them. But one of my favorite parts of this episode is the conversation that Mark and Cecil have in the hallway of the dorm room. When Cecil's like, no, like, I need you on the team. You need to do this. And he's like, no, you can't tell me what to do. It's essentially like, you need me. Not even like you need me more than I need you. I don't need you at all for anything ever. And you need me or else the whole planet is fucked. So, and like, while he's right, the funny part about that is he's kind of heading down a similar path there to what happened with his father. And, you know, that's a very present theme for Mark throughout this whole season so far, is that he's afraid and he doesn't want to do these things that would set him even on a similar path to that. But he's kind of treating Cecil like, and you know, Cecil's a scumbag. Like, I'm not advocating that Cecil should be treated well and fairly, because he's always got his own agenda. He treats people like shit. I mean, that's kind of how you have to. He reminds me a lot of Amanda Waller, the way she has to kind of like boss, like the way a regular person kind of has to act if they're going to be in charge of a bunch of superheroes.
Nick Fury meets like, Amanda Waller.
Right, exactly. Because he does have a little bit of a, like, Amanda Waller is just like she'll just scream in your face. She's brutal. You know, she obviously puts the bombs in the back of there. Like, Cecil's not. That's actually such a great comp because he really is right in the middle of the two of them. Because, you know, Nick Fury is very sit down, have dinner with you, talk through this. And Amanda Waller's like, I'll put a bomb in your head. And Cecil's like right in the middle of that. So that's actually, yeah, it's a great shout. But yeah, I mean, Mark has so much. It's interesting that he's able to even handle all this. I mean, I know obviously having superpowers, but having been to college myself, I only had to do college, like full-time student, and it still kicked my ass for 4 years. So the fact that Mark is able to, you know, be a superhero, be in college, manage a relationship, and then now being a brother and doing all this stuff. I mean, what a character. But yeah, it's crazy how much just him alone. Like, I know we were talking about the show in general, the stories they're telling, but it's crazy like Mark alone. And it makes sense given he's the main character, but just how much he has to balance all at once. It's really nuts.
And we get to the kind of the post-credit scene of this one after all shit breaks loose, and we'll see the fallout of that in future episodes. But one thing I found interesting on the post-credit scene, and rather than me just assuming, because last time I did this, I was like, yeah, you don't know much about Avatar: The Last Airbender, and you were like, yeah, I've seen all the episodes. Or no, that was for Percy Jackson. That was for Percy Jackson. Yeah. I've read all the books. And so what is your background with the Dragon Ball Z series at all? Is that something you watched growing up? Zero. Okay.
Zero. So, nothing.
One thing, we talked about all these different tropes that Invincible likes to pull from these different places. And the one I found very interesting, because I didn't know this was coming. And apparently this is something from the comics that TJ Pastilli wrote up in his article, but it's the way they handle it is a little different. And that is that when Alan the alien almost dies, he comes back way stronger. And that's why I wrote the rundown, Alan the jacked alien. And so one of the things that I did not realize is that was going to be happening, and that is straight from Dragon Ball Z. That is Goku, that is Vegeta, that is any member of the Saiyan race. Whenever they almost die, they come back way stronger. Whenever they get beat up to shit, they learn from their mistakes and they are smarter and they're stronger. And so that was something I found very interesting, that Alan the Alien coming back, Seth Rogen, he's gonna be a real threat for the Viltrumites, and that's gonna be an interesting thing going forward. I was happy I caught that little comparison, to mix Dragon Ball Z with that one, with all the other things that they mix in there as well. But for more Invincible talk, stay tuned every week, because we're going to be breaking each and every episode down. And there's 3 more left after this one. Maybe we'll bring in some guests. Not sure. Haven't thought that far ahead yet. I got a baby coming in 2 weeks, people. How am I supposed to think about planning ahead this much? But we do got a Bad Batch breakdown to do as well, because we got half Invincible, we got half Star Wars, and now it is time for the Bad Batch. And to help us break it down, we're not doing this solo. We got to bring in a Star Wars expert. When I'm out here spouting off last week that Omega is going to be Rey's mom, that's my crazy theory. We got to bring in an expert to tell me if that is batshit crazy or potentially reasonable. And so we got our guy, Thomas Carter Rochester from the Reckless Rebellion podcast. TCR, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. I'm glad that I caught only the word Invincible sitting here in the lobby. I feel good. Came in right at the perfect time. Yeah, you're not that crazy, but it's kind of crazy. I did some math live on an episode when we were talking about it. And I was like, if you carry the one, people are like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm doing the math. This is, we'll call it 18 years BBY before the Battle of Yavin. To get to where Mando is would be an extra 9-ish years. You got 3 plus 5, 8. That's what, 25 years. So Omega would be 35. Rey was born 18 years prior to The Force Awakens, which gives about 12 years after Return of the Jedi, which you minus the 5 years gives you an extra 7. So she's 42 years old at the time of the birth of Rey. And I don't know if Jodie Comer was that age. Basically where it came down to. And then I may have mentioned, I'm like, well, the female reproductive system, and then I was like, never mind, I'm a dude. I can't talk about that because I don't know anything.
Let's put a short video together. How do midichlorians affect the female reproductive system? That'll be definitely something that we are qualified to
absolutely
to break down.
Or we could just not do that, and I think everybody would be just as well off for it.
Yeah, we're gonna say Rosario Dawson. We'll ask her.
We're gonna call that. She's the expert on this situation. What did you think before we dive into specifically 6 and 7? What are your thoughts on this season of the Bad Batch so far?
I'm loving it. I love the I've been a fan of the Bad Batch for a while. The Bad Bitch, and on our show, I'm the highest on it by a lot. And then this season, everyone's like leveled out. They're like, oh my god, like leveled out with me. They're like, man, this is so good. This is like one of the best episodes of Star Wars television. And I was like, I mean, that's saying a lot, but I agree with the action of it. And so it's really funny because I feel like I'm not as high as the other guys, but that's because my hype hasn't gone wavering up and down. Even the pod racing that wasn't pod racing episode from season 2, I enjoyed. But this season, what I was hoping for was they would be darker, more mature, play in the fact that now the Empire is, we are directly involved in the Empire by having Omega. And what they've done so far, the 3-episode drop was beautiful. It was amazing. We got Necromancer drop. I lost it. I was listening to Aftermath trilogy at the time, and like the same day that dropped, they brought up Project Necromancer for the first time in the books, and I was like, it's all happening. The stuff is aligning. The poetry's rhyming. Oh baby, and we're not two-timing like we're Ric Flair. Woo! So I absolutely have been on the ride. I've been enjoying it. The fact we have a dog on the team, I love her. I love Little Batcher. I'm worried that something might happen. This is easily the best season of the Bad Batch, not even close. And it kind of feels like it's on par with season 7 of Clone Wars in terms of the tone, and the maturity, especially.
That's something I brought up to Adam last week. Is I feel it tough to compare to Clone Wars as a whole, right? Because the highs are so high in Clone Wars. It's some of the very best Star Wars. The lows, pretty boring at times, depending on your taste in various stories. But this to me is like the first series that feels comparable to Rebels. This is like the same quality of storytelling as Rebels, and I like what you said about the darker twist as well. What did you think, Adam, about episodes 6 and 7 specifically? This was kind of coming at a fun rewatch time for me too, because I just finished with Ava, my wife, Avatar: The Last Airbender. We just finished that season 3 on my third rewatch, and it was her first time going past season 1. And so we had a great time. We actually just started the first episode of Legend of Korra again today. It'll be my second watch, her first. But funny timing, because her favorite character is Appa, and so here I got my Avatar: The Last Airbender Agents of Fandom sweater going perfectly right here as well to make the reference. But Appa and Momo, for those who don't know, are voiced by D. Bradley Baker, the same guy who voices Rex, Echo, the Bad Batch, all the clones. And so we went straight from watching Appa and Momo into watching the Bad Batch this morning as I rewatched these episodes 6 and 7. What did you think about the dual release this week?
Yeah, well, the dual release is obviously a little bit shocking, but it makes sense to me given that both of these two episodes, and I know we'll talk about the differences and the similarities between the two. They both focus so much on. I like that TCR as well. You brought up that maturity aspect because they've kind of been leaning almost into and away from at the same time this season so far the problems and everything that's going on with Crosshair, like his hand shaking and all this kind of stuff, and everybody's giving him so much shit about. No, like we can't, no matter what you've done, we can't trust you and all this. And we talked a little bit last week about the speech that he gave to Hunter. That's like, I think you're just jealous because I saved her. And there's, a lot of truth to that. But in these two episodes, we finally get him to open up and get him to talk a little bit about what happened. And that's so great and so rewarding because, again, last week, like we talked about, shout out to Garrett, who said that this is just genuinely and just like 100% a better show when Omega and Crosshair are kind of like the main two focus, because that lone wolf and cub that we've talked about so many times in the show and so many different mediums and so many different shows and movies and all that is so relevant with the two of them, and it's so powerful. And it's the fact that he finally gets to, like, he's almost forced to open up to by so many people. It reminds me a lot of talking about Avatar, you made me think of it too. The episode at the beginning of season 2 of Avatar, the animated series, when they try to force him into the Avatar state by and that was like, oh, we can end the war now. We can take on the Fire Lord now if we can figure out and get you to master and force you into the Avatar state. And it's like they've almost forced Crosshair to kind of finally come, because it's pretty clear throughout the entire season he's always been a very quiet character, but he really didn't want to open up and talk about all this because in his mind he's moved past it. He's confident and comfortable with where he's at, but it's not like, obviously he's got some things to work through in his head, but it's that he's like, I don't need to go out, and that's kind of what's holding him back too, though, right? He's like, I don't need to go out and voice my problems and voice all this to everybody. I'll work through this on my own. That's what I've been doing my whole life. I work through it on my own. But then by nature of it, he's almost forced to, because everybody's like, we don't trust you. We don't trust you. He's like, you know what? If you guys don't trust me, fuck you. How about this? And then he kind of unloads on everybody, which is great to see because he's such a quiet, conserved character all the time. So it was great to see him finally explode. That was kind of the highlight to me. And even like not explode in a way that he yelled at anybody, but just that he finally opened up and talked about everything that he's been going through and where his head's at. That was the best part of these episodes to me.
TCR, I don't know if you know this about Star Wars. Maybe I'm going to teach you something. But at times, it could be a little woke. Star Wars can be. And so that's one of the parts I really enjoyed about the beginning of this episode. That was satire. Yes, absolutely. One of the parts I really enjoyed about the beginning of this episode is we get a conversation between former separatists former Republic truthers finding ways that they could, keep each other safe, unite against Emperor Palpatine. And what that really made me think about is the quote where it's like a lot of people will say, just because we don't agree on politics doesn't mean we can't be friends. And, that's the case when it comes to tax percentages and import-export laws. But when it comes to basic human rights, probably fucking not. Like, if you think a certain group of people doesn't deserve to exist with the same rights as we do, yeah, that's not going to be a different political thing to me. That just tells me that you're a terrible person. And that's kind of what I got out of this conversation here was, hey, just because we don't align politically, we have different thoughts, that doesn't mean we can't unite here because we have the same moral values. And we know that this guy is terrible. I thought that was it seemed like, kind of almost like a small plot point set up, bringing away for these ghost clones to come in and wreak havoc. But it was actually a really poignant conversation to me.
Yeah, no, it was, it's kind of super rare in Star Wars. I think the only time we've seen that is not Clovis, that piece of crap garbage senator. Oh my god, the kid from Ahsoka's quote unquote boyfriend. That series of episodes where she was with, I just can't remember what it was. But it was Padme's friend. That was on the separatist side, and they were coming together to try and negotiate a peace treaty to end the war from both sides, and then it all fell through because it was Palpatine all along. And so having that back was really nice, especially because who doesn't love a blue senator? You know what I'm saying? Senator Chuchi out here. And then what was the other? Singh with the greatest mustache of all time. Is it a mustache? Yeah, it might be a mustache. It might be a beard. It could be an Arrakis breathing tube. Who really knows?
It could just be his skin. It's Star Wars. Maybe that's like Ahsoka's tails kind of thing. Like that's just on his body.
I love that. Yeah, we don't know what it's like on that planet. And them having that nice conversation was beautiful. And of course, it's Senator Chuchi out here, being one with a heart. And as soon as they were brought in, I was like, oh, we're going to go back to last season with this whole shindig. Like, this is going to be exciting. A direct continuation of episodes 7 and 8 of season 2, which was the clone conspiracy and something else, where we saw how Palpatine corrupts the actual Senate. And it's kind of beautifully haunting to watch. And you talk about D. Bradley Baker, don't ever forget that he was also the voice of Morris in Shang-Chi. And equally,
every animal, beast, monster-ish character that won't speak English, that just makes noises, is voiced by D. Bradley Baker in all of your favorite shows ever.
Including Frogman and Frog Lady, which I did not know until today in season 2 of Mando. So what a guy. He can do all the voices. I like this one. So I really love
crazy, but I actually think it would have been cool if he would have done some clone stuff in live action, because he actually sort of looks like the animated version of some of the clones when they have the hair up top. He doesn't look that far off of it.
Maybe he's Omega's dad. We don't know.
There's an idea.
There's an idea. Maybe he's Rey's dad, and then it's all coming together now. I really loved how we got a little bit of opening up, like you mentioned, from Crosshair too, because my favorite part of that is what he does reveal makes me go, oh, he knows so much more than he's letting us. Like this whole time, I'm like, come on, you got to trust him. We saw what he did. We're the audience. And this week, I'm like, oh, dude, I don't know. Like, he knows some stuff that now I'm just like super excited to know about, including it's like, why don't you ask him? Isn't that right, brother? And it's like,
that's so good.
I was like, oh man, like, let's go. He's digging deep on this old gimpy man. And then we also get a great line later on. We see him kind of opening up and warming up. It's like, I see how you talk with the kid. You're different than you were on Ryloth. And he's like, yes, I can't do a crosshair to save my life. I tried all day. But
it's so funny when you bounce in and out of these voices, how often just like New Zealand accent slips into your everyday thing. It was well, the one time you were just like going completely normal, but then it was like Omega. And like it's so funny that like you just hear it pop in every now and then.
You know, I'm a bit of a Kiwi. I play around here and there. But it goes long, and Omega, there it is, says, "Oh, you're just as bad as Hunter," and he's like, "I'm worse, actually." And it's like, oh, he would be. Hunter's the guy, like the father who will stare at you and be like, "You better not hurt her." And Crosshair is like, "I will shoot you 5 times before you even feel it." And it's like, yeah, you know, he's not afraid to go back to prison.
No kidding. And yeah, that was sorry, the voices are so great that they throw me off where I wanted to go next with it. But the moments between, like, we got the great Crosshair and Rex stuff last week, and it kind of lends itself to Rex defending Crosshair this week, but bringing things back. Adam, I know I've been reading the recaps up at agentsofandom.com. I know who you've been waiting to see at the end of every single one of these episodes. And guess what? Rex is back.
It's so funny. We talked about this a little bit last week, but like, because Garrett is the resident Rex stan of this group, and as I'm writing each of these recaps, you know, we're watching through the episodes, and I'm watching and writing one at a time, and I'm pretty much ending each recap with like, you know, no Rex this week, but maybe next week, maybe he's coming. And like by episode 5, Garrett was texting me like, you know, Rex is not a part of Clone Force. Like he's in the show, but he is not one of the main characters, right? I was like, shut up, I don't care. I'm still waiting for him to come back because I know he's coming. And then we finally get him. And not only is he like, we're focusing on the Bad Batch, and then he kind of meets up with him. Like the whole first portion of this episode is focused just on him, which is great. But yeah, I'm so glad, you know, just like we talked a lot about this last week, so I won't rehash a lot of this, but I'm never going to advocate for less Rex in any medium at all. So it's great that he's back. And I was really just relieved watching this for the first time that I could quit working that into my recaps in some way. Like, no Rex this week. I was like, finally, now I can put him in the title. Fan favorite character, Rex returns. It's so great to have him back.
And on the note of Rex and Echo, because that was the other person that you had brought up in the articles as well, we do get some Echo in this episode, but I noticed like this is a complaint that a lot of people have on Twitter about this about the season so far, is that Echo has seriously been sidelined. He really doesn't have much of a role in season 3 of the Bad Batch. Adam, I'll start it with you here first, and then TCR, the same question for you. But do you think the lack of Echo is just happenstance because of how much is going on with other things, or do you think there is a arc for Echo clearly being set up here for the second half of the season?
So, I mean, I wouldn't be stunned. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, there's definitely something coming. There's something big coming, just because these are 20-minute episodes of TV. They're already accomplishing a lot. They've set up a lot in this season and this show as a whole. And they're making a lot of like connections right now that could tie to other things like TCR, like you were talking about earlier, the Project Necromancer stuff. We're seeing the Emperor and Hemlock and cloning, all the same stuff that we've seen in The Mandalorian. There's no telling what kind of connections they're going to draw. So, you know, somebody, just by nature of these being 22-minute episodes of TV, I think somebody's kind of going to get the short end of the stick in terms of not getting a really meaningful arc. So that would be my guess as to what's happening. Now, it really doesn't bother me all that much, just because I'm a little bit, now I'm not going to push back on anybody and be like, no, like he is getting a really meaningful arc, and here's what it actually is meaningful, and you're interpreting it wrong, and here's why. I'm not going to say that to anybody, but for me personally, it doesn't really bother me, even that we haven't really gotten anything crazy from him so far, and that I don't think anything crazy from him is coming, that even if he's just kind of a supporting character, because what we have gotten so far is working so well that I'm not like, oh man, this would be better with like a whole other side, because Echo just honestly doesn't really fit into what they already have going on with like Hunter and Wrecker and Omega. I mean, Hunter and Crosshair and Omega and all that stuff. He doesn't really fit into that, and there's just not time to establish him as his, like, and his own thing going on. So I kind of think that's just the nature. I mean, yeah, like I said, he got the short end of the stick, but I don't know. I'd be just to go back to your original question, I'd be surprised if they're setting up something big for him. I think he might kind of finish out as a side character, but I'm fine with that just because what we are getting right now is so good.
Yeah, I half agree that I agree with the part that he's going to be a side character, but he's appeared twice, right? I think of the 2 times we've seen him, he's always gathering intel. And in this one, he gathers another clone.
At least very important one that I noticed.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, he was one of those big beefy boys that have been hanging out on Tantus. It's what it looked like with his armor. I've seen it one time. I need to rewatch it, but I was like, okay, so he left and came back with another person. And the first time we see him, he leaves and comes back with information from someone who just got back from Tantus. He does. I do believe he has a conversation with Crosshair a little bit, as much as those two can have a conversation. I happen to think that he's subtly being set up because the episode 15, the finale, is titled "The Cavalry Has Arrived." That was a terrible record. I apologize to all of the one fan out there that asks for that every week. And I think that the cavalry is actually just everybody that Echo's going out and getting. And I don't know if we'll see him again. And I don't really need to see Echo again. They've done just enough where it's like, here's a baby little seed. Here's one piece of grass growing in the ground, to where it comes back and it's like, yeah, I've been doing this for so long. Because, I would say that Rex is the planner and Echo is the executor, but because he's also half robot, he can kind of like foresee things in a totally different way and can piece together the plot threads. I'm literally, I don't know, my brain just thought it's basically I'm Echo. I can piece together random plot threads from nothing and just weave it together to make a good web, not a Madam web. So
Echo's web connects us all.
That's right. That's right. He's got and that web is controlled by a scomp hand.
I saw another thing I saw on Echo on Twitter today is like, why does he have that as his hand? And instead, why doesn't he just get a mechanical hand that has one of those on it? That does feel like it'd be more beneficial, but it's times of maybe he's scrounging. He doesn't have the time to get that kind of operation. The part that I found very interesting about this episode, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit too, but because it's into episode 7, but the person that Echo went to get here is Gregor. And if you remember in Star Wars Rebels, when the Rebels meet Rex for the very first time, he is with Gregor. It's Gregor, Rex, and Wolf. Yep. And Wolf is the guy that they run into at the end of this episode, who stands at the end of episode 7, who stands down and decides like, no, we're not going to take these guys in. We're going to bury their dead and we're going to let them go. I found that to be very interesting, that all these years down the line, we now know, I knew how that was going to end kind of, because we know Wolf, Gregor, and Rex are going to end up as a little squad that are hanging out years and years down the line in Star Wars Rebels. So I found that was very interesting, that Echo is essentially, I don't know if that'll make any difference for him throughout the rest of the Bad Batch, but he was kind of he assembled that little squad in this episode that we will then begin to see in the Bad Batch. Adam, what do you think about the kind of villain antagonist choice in this one? Obviously, know it's all coming from Hemlock. We get that side, but the ghost clones, they're going after Omega. They're going after the Senator. The one was called, I think, referred to in episode 7 as Clone X. Or maybe that's just something I saw on Twitter. I don't remember, but they were being referred to as like ghost clones. We don't know who the hell these guys are, and we don't know where they're coming from. What do you think about them as a villain choice? I kind of think of them as inclositors, like inquisitors, but clones.
There's something good somewhere in that arena. I don't think we quite hit the home run with that. I think there's something there though. But no, they're
Inquisiclones. Inquisiclones.
That's better. We'll
Clone Inquisitors.
We're cooking. We got something on the grill right here, but we still got to season it. We got to cook it right. We got to do all this. But No, I'm glad you brought that up because it made me it like triggered a memory, and then I went and I pulled up the recap in episode 7. The first picture that I have of my episode 7 recap says the fewer details the Bad Batch season 3 shares about these mysterious clone assassins, the better it serves the story. And that to me, like it really does add to it, like you said, this mysterious element that's like, who are they? And the only moments we get, the only like time they speak, like you guys were talking about earlier, the whole like brother. That's like so just to say one word like that, and then it immediately opens up TCR, like you were talking about. There's so much that we don't know about Crosshair. And was he one of these troops for like a long time? Like all these there's so much we don't know. So it's like, well, I mean, I guess we know he wasn't one of those troops for a long time, but we like what he knows about them and all this. But any kind of mysterious villain, I love. You know, we've talked about this before. I think Marvel often gets into a little bit of a habit of feeling like you can't show the audience something without like also kind of immediately following it up with a direct, like you can't let characters be mysterious like this in terms of like if we would get something like this in an MCU show or whatever, then we'd need like a flashback later in the episode showing where they came from and what they were doing. And I like that we're not getting anything like that in this, that it's keeping them very vague, very ambiguous, very mysterious. Now, I don't think that'll be the case throughout the whole season. I mean, I feel like we'll have to learn, inevitably we'll need to learn something about where they're, exactly what all is going on with them and everything. But I don't know, they're a great, I know, like you said, they're still not they're kind of like a secondary, like a B tier, because they're not the real villain. Hemlock's the real villain. And the real like reason behind all this, behind what's going on, which is like they talk about, I'm jumping ahead again at the end of this episode. They're like, the only way you're going to solve this is if you find out what Hemlock's up to. That's the only way this ends. You can't run. You can't there's nothing else you can do to stop it or to run away from it or whatever. You got to trace this back to the source and deal with it. But I like that these are their kind of obstacles and objectives to get through on the way to that, because they are really, really creepy. Because especially their outfits and all this kinds of stuff. I wouldn't want to. If I saw one of these things, I'd be terrified. So that's good to me. That's good enough to me that I'm like, you know what, I'm all in.
If like always, Adam, you just brought up during Invincible that you like to do this, but it's a good thing. It's because you're so great at it. If either of you want to kind of like adjust the questions I'm asking you here, because I'm kind of trying to frame it in terms of Adam asking about the episode in more of like a critical vein, right? Of like, how do you think they performed when they did this? Where CCR, I like throwing you the theories, like does this make sense to you? What do you think about this character? Who could they be? And so if each of you want to answer the other one, feel free to just pivot. But
I'll just keep my theories to myself, TJ. Jesus.
Well, every time I ask you for a theory, you're like, I don't know. And so
because I don't.
TCR, who do you think like the secondary Clone X, we don't get to see who they are. I saw some speculation on Twitter and things like that going, that's Tech. It's Tech. I'd recognize that ass anywhere. Who do you think, like that was a specific tweet that I saw, that I recognize Tech's flat ass anywhere. And so who do you think Clone X could be? And how do you feel Hemlock connects to the greater story, whether that be Palpatine, whether that be Moff Gideon, etc.?
Okay, that last one's fun. I don't know if it's Tech. Like, there is a chance that it's Tech. I could see that. But because he's also defective, I don't know how it would work on him. I've also seen it could be Commander Cody, because we don't know what happened to him. So like that would be intense. The thing that really gets me though is they seem to have heightened strength, extra marksmanship, speed, the ability to track on a whole different level of like, foot tracks. He literally gets off and he's like, looks in here, and then he's like, looks over, looks down, looks back over, as if they went that way. So my tinfoil hat theory is they made a new clone that combines the genetic defects of all the clones. It's a super bad batcher, like a super 99. Like a, what is it, Weapon 11 or whatever from Logan. Like it's that. And they just took them and took all the BS out of this one. Could it be Tech? Sure. It's weird that he's now like a different level of combatant that we've not seen before. Not saying he wasn't capable. Ooh, okay. Ooh, you know what? All right. You got me there. Yep. Yeah, gave him a robot arm. Ha. Now he's tech for real. I was also wondering like who he was gonna call. There was a moment where he's away, everything falls apart. He runs back, he's told not to do something by Wolf, and he's like, all right, whatever. And he goes like a certain place, hits his little comm button, and it fritzes out. And I was like, who are you gonna call? We're gonna call for more guys? Oh, what is this? Who is this? Hemlock. All right. Let's put the hat back on. The tinfoil hat is on. Is Hemlock the father of Glasses McGlassy Face from Mando?
What's his name?
It's close. Dr.
The
Percy.
guy that Katie O'Brien was working with. Yeah.
So the thing that bothers me is mathematically speaking, really pushing it. Hemlock is old enough to be his dad, of course, but he never speaks of his dad, Pershing. And at the same time, he was born, if I'm not mistaken, during the Clone Wars. We find out in the Mandalorian episode, season 3, episode 3 or 2, whatever one they went to Coruscant and played around on the New Republic's house. So that is a theory that I've been simmering on. Just
look
because,
at us with our parental theories.
Yeah, I know. Hey, everybody's got a dad somewhere. And listen, if Luke is Vader's son, like everybody's related, right? It's the Skywalker saga after all. I really do think that what we're playing with in terms of Hemlock's specific thing is really driving the narrative forward. I have been on the train that Omega might be force sensitive since season 1. I thought I was saying it on Reckless Rebellion, but I forgot. We didn't have that show when season 1 premiered back in the dark times of the Pandorama. So I recognized, like, last season, it was kind of really tamped down. It was more fun. This season, episode 1, I'm like, oh, she's force sensitive. She's got the M's. And I think that's because she's a clone combination of Jango Fett and one Sheev Palpatine.
I do too. That's why I think that she's Rey's mom, because I think that would make sense that, like, if Palpatine, that if she has midichlorians in her, I think they would have come from Palpatine, and to me that makes sense in terms of like Rey's grandfather, if that's like the DNA in Omega, because he was her quote unquote father. So I was thinking the same thing with that, and that's actually where my theory went with the ghost clones of, if they are somewhat force sensitive, are they the newest version of what they were trying to do with Omega? Because we know Omega happened a long time ago. She's older than the rest of the clones. She started as a child, and she's growing at the same pace as a normal human does. Is this the accelerated growth version of what they were trying to do with Omega?
That is interesting. I actually really like that theory, because then it allows the opportunity to go, I mean, they may have been doing this all along, or they just upped their ghost clones after finding out her blood had the M count necessity, and they took that small vial and spread it across the clones that they have, because although Necromancer is the main important topic going on with Hemlock, getting Omega back is the key to Necromancer moving forward. So we can take this DNA, spread it out, maybe introduce it into new clones and foster it, and then utilize them instantaneously to get her back. It's almost like she caught herself, right? The theory on the parents. So I don't remember if it was in the comics or what, but it was set up that it was one of Palpatine's clones / sons is the father of Rey. And in the book, The Shadow of the Sith, yeah, that's the right name. It's set 15-ish years. Rey's 6 years old, so that makes it like what, 12 years before, I think, plus or minus on before Attack of the Force Awakens, that movie. There's so many subtitles. So in that book, it discusses the son's experience of growing up on Exegol, how much he hated it. Remember seeing Vader show up, and he actually escaped Exegol around the Return of the Jedi time frame. He's not force sensitive, which is what, but he's left to be alive. I don't remember if the book actually says he's a clone, or if it just turns out that, you know, like as Ian McDermott talked about recently with Variety or whatever it was, he fucks. So that's gross. But maybe that's where Rey's father actually comes from. It's not just a clone progeny or clone, it's actually a progeny, which would be extra effing weird. How does that tie in with Omega? I have no idea, mine. Oh man, I don't like the idea I just had. I don't want to say it out loud. I'm not going to say it out loud.
Adam, I'm going to throw it to you to pivot to Crosshair specifically, because we see it throughout tweet. Disappointment on his face.
Yeah.
I talk about all the time how I really don't like the trope of like superhero losing their superpowers. And while that is slightly going on a little bit with Crosshair, you know, with the handshakes and things like this, I'm not bothered by it with Crosshair because it's making complete sense to me. It's almost like throwing it back to Avatar: The Last Airbender, as Zuko struggling with his fire, with a firebending kind once he turns good kind of thing. What do you think about the storyline of Crosshair specifically, with him wanting to be redeemed but unable to take the pressure and his hand is shaking, with his little new relationship with Omega, where we see so much more? We talked about it a bit last week, but we see so much more of it this week, with Omega fiddling with the toothpick in her mouth the exact same way that Crosshair does. And you brought up earlier with the like him saying like he's worse than Hunter in that situation. What do you think about Crosshair's development, and where do you think it could be going after the whole, like, we buried the lead a little bit earlier, but the brother thing, him clearly knowing more than he's leading on?
Well, I mean, all the Crosshair stuff has been great, and I'm glad it was actually a great comparison to talk about like what happens with Zuko, because that the trope of taking away somebody's, whether it's a power or just in general, like for Crosshair, like a really good ability, like to be a good sharpshooter like that, it would be really frustrating if we didn't know exactly what was spurring that on. And we know what it is, and I think he knows what it is too, but it's really hard for him to let go. And it's also a really common trope, this whole, in order to unlock your full potential, you need to let go of your past. You need to do that. That's like a pretty common thing, but it's common because it works really well most of the time. And it's working really well here too. And that we know, we're watching and we're waiting, like he's got to open up, and he opens the gate a little bit here, right? Like the chi or whatever you want to call it. The door is open, the gate's open, and it starts to flow a little bit, but he's still almost denying that because it's almost like we were talking about earlier, like it's almost by force right here, because everybody's hounding him so much. I don't really get the feeling that in this situation he was ready in either one of these episodes to really talk about what happened to him. But we know in order for him, and we're going to get that moment almost certainly later in the season where however it comes, if it's like right after or whenever, he finally lets go and he aims down and they zoom in on his hand and it's completely steady and it's nothing. And he takes a shot, whether it's to save, maybe it's something like he needs to save Omega. That's the only thing, like Crosshair or Hunter, somebody's right beside him and like he's missing a couple of shots and his hand's shaking and they're like, you need to hit this now. And he like turns over and says, like, he finally comes clean to him. He says, this and this and this, and then he takes the shot and he hits it. Whether it's we get some kind of moment like that or it's something more quiet to himself, and then ultimately I still think we're going to get, they don't show the handshaking type thing. If we're not going to eventually get some kind of, the hand is steady now, he takes a shot to some kind of very, very important shot that makes a big difference, I'd be very surprised if we don't get that. But all of the stuff going on with him, while it's not anything we haven't seen before, these are tropes that, we're all familiar with. They're working so well that I can't get enough of it. And I want to see him come to terms with, with his past and admit that, like, we're not, another thing, like another common thing, we're not defined by the mistakes of our past. Like, sure, he fucked up now, but he's trying, he's better now. He's taking care of, doing his job, taking care of Omega and doing this all this kind of stuff. And maybe it's like even a moment too where the two of them, like him and Hunter, have to come clean to each other about what they're feeling, because they do a little bit of that in this episode, but it still feels very forced. And then it's kind of like, before they can really get anywhere with it, they get attacked, and then they have to kind of move on and stuff. So I don't know. There's so much. I mean, there's so much coming. Like, obviously, we've only seen the next episode, so we have no idea what's coming in the last 9 through 15. But they've really built up some interesting stuff. And I know that moment when he finally lets go, he takes that shot, his hand is steady. I'm probably going to tear up a little bit just because they've done such a great job telling that story to this point. It's going to be great.
Crosshair cracks open a beer, has a sip of alcohol in his hand, steadies. The withdrawal is no longer there, and he's able to know. I agree. I love that call.
Cerveza, he reaches over and grabs a Cerveza.
Cerveza Cristal. Steadies his hand, cracks it open, steadies his hand, hits the shot. But no, I agree. I think that exact same thing is going to happen that you were mentioning. One of my favorite unconfirmed headcanon things about the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that Captain America could not lift Mjolnir until he came clean to Tony about everything that happened with Bucky and his parents. As soon as he did, he was able to lift the hammer, and he was worthy. I kind of feel that a little bit similarly to Crosshair of what will happen here is he doesn't feel worthy to be back with his team. He's verbally being like, this wasn't my fault, I didn't do this, I was in prison, what could I know? But he knows that there's more accountability that needs to be taken, and he's not going to get that back until he takes that accountability. What do you think about his arc, TCR?
I don't know if he gets his steadiness back. Actually, I don't see it happening. I see that being like the final. I see his arc playing out where he knows he can't take the shot, and he asks someone else to take it for him because they have a steady hand. And that is like,
Omega.
Oh yeah, I like that one. Yeah. Because it's so played in, and if I'm not, I don't know if this is headcanon, this is from Legends. I mean, part of it's definitely from Legends. There was a degenerative clone issue where aging up clones as fast as they did led to their minds fracturing, frailing, and going insane. And there was like a specific thing, Thrawn books, baby. Shout out Timmy Zahn. There was a way to like, you had to do something at the same time as that, and it reversed the effects and stabilized their mind. So they mentally and physically age up at the same time. And it's like years of information like pumped into their head, similar to how we see it in Attack of the Clones with all the, beepity boppity boobs that they got going on there with like I don't know, I guess that would be
the opposite of Poor Things 2023.
Exactly. I've not seen that. So there you go. It's exactly the opposite of that. So when it comes to him, I feel like he's got the degenerative clone disease. Like if you're aged to a certain point, like that also leads to the likelihood that you also decline at a faster rate. If you're aged at an accelerated rate, you're likely to decline at an accelerated rate because Newton's second law, everything has an equal and opposite every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So shortens the lifespan of a body if it's stretched too fast, if you will. Same with a muscle. Hashtag pulled my hamstring, still not good. So I totally understand where it's coming from. And I think that his main arc in growth is to come clean, not be the secretive, I can do it all on my own, but to be the guy who's like, I can't do this. It's too important. You have to do it. Because if I do it, I'm going to miss, and we can't miss. Oh, God, it's got to be Omega when it happens. God, I love that. That was great. Yeah, we're going to see that happen. And or just for me, it's Ventress. Oh, my queen.
Another one that we got her in the trailer, and then no Ventress yet. We still don't really know what's going on with her, and so it's
on Ventress watch.
Very exciting, like you said, Adam. We know what happens next week. We've watched episodes up to episode 8, like what, almost 2 months ago now. It seems like, and it was just to 8, and we have no idea what's coming after that. Very exciting stuff. I can't wait to finally see Ventress for the first time. I can't wait to see what happens with Crosshair, because I like that call, TCR, as well, because the big thing with him is his ego. He doesn't want to be seen as less than, and he wants to be the best and they're above the normie clones. And that has always been one of the more important to him than the others. And so going to be very interesting to see how that shakes out for him. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Omega and the Empire, as they are clearly still after her, and what the future could behold with her. Is she going to intertwine with Grogu at some point? Is she going to become Rey's mom? Who knows? We don't know, but hopefully we'll find out a little bit more as the season progresses. And of course, we'll be breaking it down next week alongside Invincible episode 6, season 2 episode 6, and the season premiere, 2-episode premiere of X-Men 97 on Disney Plus, March 20th. We'll be breaking that down as well. So later today, if you're listening to this on the day that it drops, we will also be I'll be having my interview with head of Marvel Studios television animation and streaming, Brad Winderbaum. And then, of course, you can also check out our interview with George Buza, the voice actor for Beast in the animated series, as well as X-Men 97, with one of our newest members, TJ Pastilli, a.k.a. Fat Thor. So make sure you check that one out as well. And, of course, check the website every day, as Adam likes to say, because we have so much great Invincible, Bad Batch, and South by Southwest content, reviews for movies like Monkey Man and The Fall Guy. Brand new. Our guy Ethan was there in South by Southwest, checking those ones out as well. So make sure you head over to the website for that. TCR, where can the people find the podcast? Where can the people find you on socials?
You can find Reckless Rebellion, the podcasts with enough chaotic energy to fuel a Death Star. All about the wars and the stars. Wherever you get your podcast, you can tweet at us at Reckless Rebels, RECKLESSREBELS. On Twitter. X is, it's the X formerly known as Twitter. And you can find me personally on all the socials at TC Rochester Act, TCROCHESTERACT. We have a screening for a feature film I was in, Zombies, coming up on April 5th in Pensacola, Florida. So if you're hanging out here in the, I don't think anybody who listens is hanging out where I live, because I don't think many people here like this stuff. You know what I'm saying? However, if you are, come on out, hang out, say hi, dress to impress. Am I trying to outdress everybody? Yes, I am, because I'm just competitive about things that no one else cares about, including Sudoku. So,
I don't judge. I in my old Tinder profile, I included in there that I was the iPad world record holder for Tetris, and I stand by that. I'm sure somebody beat me pretty shortly after, but at one point I held the iPad Tetris high score, and nobody can take that away from me. Thank you so much for tuning in this week, everyone. Like I said, we will be back next week breaking down more Bad Batch, X-Men 97, and Invincible. On behalf of myself, Adam, TCR, on our whole Agents of Fandom team behind the scenes, thanks for tuning in, everyone. We will see you next week. Peace.
Peace.